You're a 7-year-old at your aunt's house on a stormy Saturday night, and you decide to throw in a VHS tape. You find yourself fully immersed in a world where the characters chase after storms. The characters go to the drive-in, and that's where you witness the scariest scene that you've ever watched in your young life. A small boy rolls around the hallway on his tricycle, and a pair of twins in matching blue dresses guard the way like ghostly sentinels. Fast forward a few years, and now you've jumped into the world of Stephen King novels. By this point, you've seen that Kubrick classic, and you cherish it, along with that long ago memory. The haunted hotel, the boy with a strange power, and the loving father turned crazed maniac. A true horror classic. I don't think anything could have prepared me for what I'd find behind that hardback cover, creeping behind the walls of the Overlook. And to this day, it might be the scariest book I've ever read. Now, as an author myself, with my debut novel, Evergreen, releasing on June 5th, I've decided to go through all of Stephen King's work in order of publication and see how he evolved as a writer from story to story. Prepare to fight your inner demons, the sins of your parents, and the ghosts of the Overlook Hotel itself, as we dive into episode 3 of the Constant Reader Chronicles with The Shining. Real quick, please consider joining my mailing list in the description for any updates and information on my debut novel Evergreen releasing in June. And at the end of the video, there'll be a sneak peek at the first chapter of Evergreen. Thank you. Now on with the video. Stephen King had published a paperback version of Carrie in 1974, giving him the life-changing income that he needed to change his scenery. Picking the next location of his family from an Alamac at random, they moved to Boulder, Colorado. Things weren't all sunshine, however, as King was suffering from alcoholism and substance abuse, and the fear of becoming a failed writer, and even more importantly, a failed father. The story took shape one night as King and his wife Tabitha were staying at the Stanley Hotel as one of the only guests, as the hotel was about to close down for the season. As fate would have it, King would have a nightmare that a fire hose was chasing his son through the empty hotel halls. Now armed with the themes and the set piece of the story, he began crafting it, using it as a vessel to deal with his own insecurities and fears. The story starts us off across the desk from Stuart Ullman, the owner of the Overlook Hotel. He's interviewing our hero Jack for an upcoming position. He starts mid-conversation as he asks Jack about his family and if they can handle what this job entails. Jack negatively paints Ullman as a snobby, uptight narcissist, which pushes us to believe that Jack must be the opposite. We learn that Jack is interviewing for the caretaker position at the hotel, as Ullman tells him of his duties for the potential role. We learn that a man named Al Sharpley, who sits on the board of the directors of the hotel, wants Jack to be hired as the caretaker, but Ullman doesn't think that he's right for the job. He tells us why, starting with a brief history of the hotel and its prestige. During this, Ullman brags to Jack about how they have the nicest rope course in all of America, which Jack thinks, along with the topiary hedge animals outside, is very pretentious. If you're going to show us topiary animals and rope mallets in Act 1, you better use it in Act 3. We learn something about Jack, reflected off of Ullman as he says this: "During our first winter, I hired a family instead of a single man. There was a tragedy, a horrible tragedy." Ullman looked at Jack coolly and appraisingly. "I made a mistake. I admit it freely. The man was a drunk." Ullman expands on this, bringing up Jack's last job. We learn that he was fired after losing his temper. We then learn that the last caretaker, a man named Delbert Grady, had killed his family while staying there over the last winter, his two daughters with an axe, and then shooting himself and his wife. Jack assures Ullman that he won't be drinking, and that he and his family will be just fine. First few times I read through this book, I didn't realize how effective the opening was. It sets up our plot, our stakes, and both the history of the hotel and Jack. We're then introduced to our other two protagonists, Jack's wife and son, Wendy and Danny Torrance. Wendy's stressing if Jack will get the job or not when Danny, a 5-year-old boy, asks her why Jack had lost his last job. She tells him how George Hatfield, a boy on Jack's debate team, or arguing for fun as Danny calls it, had been caught by Jack slashing his tires. "Your daddy. Sometimes he does things he's sorry for later. Sometimes he doesn't think the way he should. That doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it does. Did he hurt George Hatfield like the time I spilt all the papers? Sometimes. Danny with his arm in a cast. He does things he's sorry for later. Wendy finishes the story, telling Danny how Jack had hit George to make him stop slashing the tires. The subtle Danny's arm in a cast line makes us want to learn more about what Jack had done to Danny. Danny then asks Wendy if she wants to go to the hotel for the winter. If it's what your father wants, it's what I want. She paused. What about you? I guess I do, he said finally. Nobody much to play with around here. The family dynamics are set up pretty well within the first few chapters, and it leaves us wondering what Jack might be capable of. All the while, the fate of Delbert Grady and the Overlook itself simmer in the background like an omen. We go back to Jack, and a man named Watson is showing him around the boiler room. As Jack stands there, the words of Stuart Ullman replay in his head, stirring the memory of the incident with Danny's arm. Danny had spilt beer on some of Jack's manuscript papers. When Jack arrived home drunk, he found Danny playing amongst the beer and spilt papers. He yanked him up by his arm, accidentally breaking it. He's yanked back to reality as Watson is telling him about the boiler. He warns Jack that if he doesn't pay attention and regulate the pressure, that it could climb up high and explode, mirroring the anger within Jack. Watson then mentions something about the hotel scandals. We learn that an older lady who was having an affair overdosed on sleeping pills while staying in room 237. Later, one of the maids was cleaning the room and saw the ghost of the old lady's naked corpse floating in the bathtub. Watson assures him that he had been there for many years and had never seen any ghosts himself. We go back to the apartment and get our first look from Danny's perspective. We learn that he's not an ordinary boy, and he seems to have a strange ability. He can tell what his mother is thinking, even from outside and downstairs away from her. It shows us the way Danny perceives things as he tries to make sense of all the adult thoughts that he sees. He begins to concentrate deeply on where his father is. This brings Danny to a sort of catatonic state, where he sometimes sees things that aren't really there. We learn about Tony, an imaginary friend within Danny, that acts as a sort of guide through his visions. This introduces Danny's powers so much smoother than King did with Carrie's powers from Carrie, telling us through the understanding of a young child that finds it normal, explaining it just vaguely enough to keep us informed but not giving away too much. Danny does concentrate, and he finds his father's thoughts. This assures him that his father didn't wreck like his mother had feared. Tony then appears in front of him, beckoning for him to follow. Danny's transported to a giant place with a lot of furniture and snow pelting the windows. Danny then hears this: smashing glass, approaching destruction, a hoarse voice, the voice of a madman, made them more terrible by its familiarity. Come out, you little shit, take your medicine. Crash, crash, crash. Splintering wood, a bellow of rage and satisfaction, red rum, coming. Danny then finds himself in a bathroom, staring at a bleeding hand that lay over the rim of a tub before teleporting to a dark hallway. He begs for Tony to let him out of the vision as a blood-soaked figure approaches him, smashing a mallet into the walls. He then wakes up, finding himself at the curb where he was before. Tony is still there but further away as he warns Danny to be careful. Jack arrives home at that moment, and we see that him and Danny are genuinely happy to see each other. The chapter ends with Danny being confused and scared of the word that he saw in his vision, red rum. Jack goes to a phone booth later and calls Al to thank him for getting him the job. He briefly ruminates on how he had lost his last one, showing us how deeply it affected him. We learned that he had met Al through drinking, and that they had binged together often. This all seemed to have come to a head 1 month after he had broken Danny's arm. He and Al were drinking and driving on one of their binges when he hit a kid's bike. They get out and search for a body, but don't find one, leaving us to wonder what had happened. Later that night, Jack pulls out a .38 special and debates taking his own life. He decides against it, and the next day, sensing that Wendy is going to divorce him, he tells her to give him a week to quit drinking. He's able to do this successfully, and this brings us to where we are now, as Jack calls Al on the phone booth. This sets up our story perfectly, as we now know the stakes for Jack and his family. Their family and future together depend on this job, and Danny understands this, keeping him from telling his father of Tony's dire warnings. They're all forced into the hotel, with seemingly no other options. The next chapter takes us right to the day that the Torrance family approaches the Overlook. As Danny first sees it, he instantly realizes that this is the place that Tony had warned him about. They arrive, and Ullman shows them around the hotel, eventually bringing them to the rote court, where Danny seems interested. As Jack starts explaining the game, he shows them the rope mallet. It's a very old game, Danny. Sometimes they have tournaments here. Do you play with a croquet mallet? Like that, Jack agreed. Only the handle's a little shorter, and the head has two sides. One side is hard rubber, and the other side is wood. Come out, you little shit. It's pronounced roke, Daddy was saying. Danny recognizes the rope mallet from his visions. Pairing this with Danny's broken arm incident and the fate of Delbert Grady's family, we start to get a good idea of what might be in store for the Torrance family. We're then introduced to the one and only Dick Halloran, the overlooked chef. He's a pleasant man, described as a black giant by Danny. From the first interaction, there's a chemistry like an old family friend as he shows them around the kitchen. As they're touring, Dick calls Danny Doc, which is a nickname that Wendy and Jack use for him. Jack and Wendy are obviously confused by this. From behind them, Jack said curiously, "How did you know we called him Doc?" Halloran turned around. "Pardon?" "Danny. We call him Doc sometimes, like in the Bugs Bunny cartoons. Looks sort of like a doc, doesn't he?" He wrinkled his nose at Danny, smacked his lips, and said, "What's up, Doc?" Danny giggled, and then Halloran said something. "Sure you don't want to go to Florida, Doc?" To him, very clearly. He heard every word. He looked at Halloran, startled and a little scared. Halloran winked solemnly and turned back to the food. This shows us that Dick is able to read people's minds in the same way that Danny is, picking his nickname up from the ether and even talking to Danny through his mind. Within 2 short pages, King has turned the introduction of a new character into a charming and trustworthy partner through the story. After the tour, Dick asks Danny if he can help him bring his bags to his car. This is where he tells Danny about The Shining, the magical force that weaves between many stories in the Stephen King universe. "You shine on, boy. Harder than anyone I ever met in my life. I'm 60 years old this January." "Huh?" "You got a knack," Halloran said, turning to him. "Me, I've always called it shining. That's what my grandmother called it too. She had it. We used to sit in the kitchen when I was a boy, no older than you, and have long talks without even opening our mouths." He then asked Danny to test the strength of his shining by thinking at him as hard as he can. Danny screams through his mind and sends Dick reeling back in his seat, grabbing at his head. After recovering, Danny explains Tony to Dick. Dick then tells Danny that his version of Tony is the smell of oranges, and that when he smells oranges, he knows that he's about to have a vision. Danny tells Dick that he had bad visions about the Overlook, and Dick explains to Danny that sometimes the visions don't come true. He tells Danny that the shine can show you things from the past and the future, and that he himself has seen some bad things at the Overlook, including the woman from room 217. He warns Danny to stay away from that room, and then describes the ghosts from there as pictures in a book, and that if he turns away, that they will disappear. He also tells Danny that he doesn't think that the ghosts can hurt him. Danny goes back with his parents, and they continue their tour with Ullman. They see their rooms, and everything seems nice and normal at first, until they get to the presidential suite. Danny sees that the room is covered with brains and blood. He turns away, just like Dick had told him to, and when he looks back, everything's gone, and it's a normal room again. The next chapter jumps ahead sometime, as Jack is making some last-minute preparations before the snow hits the Overlook. He's fixing some of the shingles when he notices a wasp nest. As he's preparing to get rid of it, he thinks back to the George Hatfield incident, the boy from the debate team. We learn the reason that he had slashed Jack's tires was because he thought that Jack was rigging the timer against him. Jack insists that he didn't, and that George just needs to fix his stutter if he ever wants to become a good debater. Later, as he catches George slashing his tires red-handed, he tells him that he needs to take his medicine before attacking him. This mirrors exactly what Danny heard from his vision when he sees the shadowy figure approaching him with the mallet. This points directly at Jack being the figure himself. We now have all the perfect ingredients to Tony's vision: the rope mallet, the Overlook, and now Jack being the figure coming towards Danny. Stephen King doesn't just hint at it, he spells it out with red ink. Now it's just a matter on if it will happen or not. As Dick had said, sometimes they don't. Wendy and Danny arrive back from town then, and Jack gives Danny the empty wasp nest. Wendy and Jack seem very happy now, a very clear juxtaposition to the swelling undergrowth behind the scenes. Later that night, however, Danny seems to have locked himself in the bathroom. Jack and Wendy bust in and find him on the ground compulsing. "Danny," he said. "Danny, Danny." He snapped his fingers in front of Danny's blank eyes. "Ah, sure," Danny said. "Tournament play, stroke, ner. Danny, roke," Danny said, his voice suddenly deep, almost manlike. "Roke, stroke, the roke mallet, has two sides. Gah! Oh, Jack, my God, what's wrong with him?" Jack grabbed the boy's elbow and shook him hard. Danny's head rolled limply backward and then snapped forward like a balloon on a stick. "Roke, stroke, red rum." Danny wakes up after this, and they ask him why he locked the door. He tells them that Tony told him to, and that he showed him something, but he doesn't remember. Jack takes him to bed, and before he leaves, Danny asks him this. "You never hurt Mommy, would you, Daddy?" "No." "Or me?" "No." Silence again, spinning out. "Daddy? What?" "Tony came and told me about Rogue." "Did he, Doc? What did he say?" "I don't remember much, except he said it was in innings, like baseball. Isn't that funny?" "Yes." Jack's heart was thudding dully in his chest. How could the boy possibly know a thing like that? As Jack wonders how Danny could possibly know about Rogue innings, he must also wonder why Danny asked him if he'd ever hurt him or his mother. Later, as Jack discusses with Wendy about taking Danny to the doctor, Danny dreams again about Tony's visions. Wendy and Jack from the other room hear Danny wake up, screaming. They bust into the room to find him being attacked by wasps. They get him to safety and then look on in horror and confusion as wasps bubble out of the previously empty wasp nest. They take Danny to the doctor the next day, where he's alone with the doctor and reluctantly tells him about being able to summon Tony if he focuses hard enough. The doctor convinces him to try it, and Danny does. Tony appears and takes Danny to the hotel, where he sees a vision of Jack going through a scrapbook in the hotel's basement. Tony then tells him this. "This inhuman place makes human monsters, this inhuman place." Repeating the same incomprehensible thing over and over. "Makes human monsters." Danny is then once again face to face with the lumbering shadow in the Overlook's halls. He wakes up then in the doctor's office and lies, saying he can't remember anything that he saw. Wendy and Jack then discuss this with the doctor and tell him about the many other examples of Danny knowing things that he seemingly shouldn't know. The doctor convinces them that these were only coincidences and that Tony was an imaginary friend. He tells them that there is nothing to worry about with Danny. Tony's warnings do, however, come to fruition in the very next chapter as Jack finds the scrapbook in the basement. He's completely enthralled and drawn into what the scrapbook lays out. The Overlook's spotted history under the ownership of Horace Derwent. It goes over the hotel's ties to the mafia, elites, and the scandals that have taken place there, from laundering to murder and everything in between. It almost feels like someone had planted the book there for Jack, with footnotes that hint at whoever put it there knowing more than the news articles let on. Jack decides to write a book about the Overlook and seems to immediately become almost obsessive over it. He promised himself he would take care of the place, very good care. It seemed that before today, he had never really understood the breadth of his responsibility to the Overlook. It was almost like having a responsibility to history. Wendy arrives back then, and Jack feels guilt as if he's been caught drinking. It's so obvious that even Wendy asks if that's what's bothering him. The chapter leaves us with a Jack that doesn't quite feel the same as before. As the days go by, things slowly begin to escalate for the Torrances. Jack begins to become increasingly agitated with Wendy, and Danny becomes more afraid, as the hotel seems to play tricks with him, including the insidious fire hose from King's Nightmares. Jack then does something that solidifies his mania with the reader. He calls Ullman and confronts him about the hotel scandals, and even tells him about his plans to write a book exposing it all. Ullman screams that he wants him out of his hotel, and Jack responds passionately, screaming that it wasn't his hotel. Right after the phone call, the thought of his family breaks through his trance, and he realizes the gravity of what he's done. He decides that he will have to call Al later to try to fix things before it's too late. Later, Jack calls Al and explains himself, telling him about his plans for the book. Al says that he must never write it, and Jack ultimately agrees, though he struggles to do so. As Jack's on the phone with Al, Wendy and Danny are in another room. Wendy worries why Jack would call Al and asks Danny this. "I wonder if Uncle Al was mad at Daddy," she said, still casually. "Yeah, he sure was," Danny said, still watching the fire. "He didn't want Daddy to write the book." "What book, Danny?" "About the hotel." The question framed on her lips was one she and Jack had asked Danny 1,000 times. How do you know that? As the book goes on, Wendy and Jack have a harder and harder time rationalizing Danny's abilities. This really builds on the psychological horror of the book, as it seems that no one can trust their own thoughts. A few days later, in Sidewinder, the town next to the hotel, Wendy asks Danny if he'd be happier if they left. Danny says he would be, but he knows how important it is to Jack. Wendy tells him that she thinks that Jack would be happier if they left too, and Danny finally decides to open up to her. He thinks maybe we'll be lonely, and then he thinks that he likes it here and it's a good place for us. He loves us and doesn't want us to be lonely or sad, but he thinks even if we are, it might be okay in the long run. Do you know long run? She nodded. Yes, dear, I do. He's worried that if we left, he couldn't get another job, that we'd have to beg or something. Is that all? No, but the rest is all mixed up because he's different now. At this point, Wendy has completely accepted Danny's powers, and though they want to leave, they stay for the sake of the family. Then we get a scene that creeps me out no matter how many times I read the book. Jack is trimming up the topiary hedge animals when he notices something off about the rabbit. His breath stopped in his throat. The rabbit was down on all fours, cropping grass. Its belly was against the ground, but not 10 minutes ago it had been up on its hind legs. Of course it had been. He had trimmed its ears and its belly. Jack begins to question his sanity as 2 lions, a dog, and a rabbit hedge animal begin to circle in on him, but only whenever he doesn't look. He buries his face in his hands, and when he looks up, they're gone, back in their original positions. He tells himself they didn't see anything, as Wendy, Danny, and now the first signs of snow all arrive. Over the next few days, the snow falls nonstop, and the telephone goes out, leaving the radio as their only line out of the overlook. That and the snowmobile outside. Inside the hotel, Danny finds himself, not for the first time, standing outside of room 217 with the passkey in his hands. Whether it be supernatural or just the normal curiosity of children, Danny is drawn to the room. Danny tries to fight his impulsive thoughts, but in the end, walks in. He senses that there's something in the bathroom. Armed with what Halloran had said about them not being able to hurt him, he continues on. Then he pulls open the shower curtain to find this. The woman in the tub had been dead for a long time. She was bloated and purple, her gas-filled belly rising out of the cold, ice-rimmed water like some fleshy island. Her eyes were fixed on Danny's, glassy and huge, like marbles. She was grinning, her purple lips pulled back in a grimace. Danny is horrified, running to the door, but finds it locked. He closes his eyes and is grabbed by the throat. Meanwhile, Wendy is knitting, trying not to fall asleep, and Jack is in the basement looking for more information on the overlook. As he does this, he drifts off and thinks about his relationship with his own father, an abusive drunk. He recalls a particularly traumatizing event where his father beat his mother with a cane, telling her that she needed to take her medicine. Jack relates this to how he broke Danny's arm, showing the internal struggle for him to not be like his father. This is devastating, and the hotel feeds off of it like dry kindling to a fire. Jack wakes up and finds himself in Ullman's office with the radio screaming at him in his father's voice, telling him that he must kill Danny and Wendy, prompting Jack to do this. He raised the radio up and brought it down, and it smashed on the floor, spilling old clock springs and tubes like the result of some crazy elevator game gone awry, making his father's voice gone, leaving only his voice, Jack's voice, Jackie's voice, chanting in the cold reality of the office. Dead. You're dead. You're dead. Wendy runs to the commotion and finds Jack standing there confused, saying that he had done it while sleepwalking. They both immediately realize that neither of them are around Danny and run to search for him. They find him in a catatonic state, with his neck badly bruised. Wendy immediately assumes that it was Jack who did it and locks him and her in their bedroom. After a while, Wendy decides that she'll need Jack's help to get him back to Sidewinder. As she opens the door to go find him, she hears him downstairs, screaming this. Roll me over and clover, roll me over, lay me down and do it again. The split is happening in real time, as Wendy now doesn't trust Jack with Danny, causing Jack to resent her. Meanwhile, the hotel has taken a more direct line of attack on Danny, as the bath lady actually strangles him. The Overlook takes your demons and uses them against you, and now the seed of murder has been planted within Jack's mind. We then switch to Jack's perspective at the very moment that Wendy locked her and Danny in the bedroom. Jack wanders into the ballroom where he thinks he sees bottles of alcohol shimmering. He flicks the light on and they disappear, and as if talking to an old friend, starts talking to Lloyd, the bartender. This starts off as a quirky joke, matching Jack's personality throughout the story when he's alone, but then Lloyd begins to talk back, as if the hotel is using his humor against him. Lloyd lines Jack up with martinis, or Martians as Jack calls them. As Jack drinks one and tosses the glass behind him, a group of old men and beautiful girls in party costumes snicker at him. He gets drunk, and suddenly, he's alone, thinking normally again. Wendy comes up to him then, holding Danny. Danny wakes from his catatonic state and runs to Jack, saying this. "Daddy," he screamed, running to Jack, his eyes huge and affrighted. "Oh, Daddy, Daddy, it was her, oh, Daddy." Jack knows that Wendy would never hurt Danny, so they both have to grapple with the fact that someone or something is stuck in the hotel with them. Wendy can't help but feel guilt at how quickly she assumed that Jack was at fault. On the heels of that came an uncomfortable, even startling thought. Had she wanted to think Jack was to blame? Was she that jealous? Much like Jack and his father, Wendy resents the traits of her mother that she finds in herself. This is something that a lot of us have to deal with. How our parents affected us, and how this affects how we treat other people around us. The constant pull of subconscious and self-awareness. The book handles this very bluntly, but in a way I think a lot of us can relate to. Danny finally opens up to his parents about everything. Tony's warnings, Dick explaining The Shining, and even him hearing Jack's phone call with Al. They ask him this. "The bruises, Danny. Who tried to strangle you?" Danny's face went dark. "Her," he said. "The woman in that room, in 217. The dead lady." His lips began to tremble again, and he seized a teacup and drank. Jack and Wendy exchange a scared look over his bowed head. Jack decides to go check it out for himself, and as he gets away from his family, the hotel's influence immediately takes him over again. He tells himself that he should actually punish Danny for going into the room. He goes into room 217's bathroom, and at first everything seems fine, but then he notices the smell of soap. He turns and sees the shower curtain has drawn itself, and there's a shadow behind it. Before opening the door to the hallway, he hears the sound of wet footsteps. Jack leaves the room, horrified, but goes down and lies to Wendy and Danny, telling them that there was nothing. The next chapter really sets in the rift happening between them, and the deterioration of Jack under the influence of the hotel. Wendy is trying to talk to Jack about getting Danny back to Sidewinder, while Jack simply reads the play, the one that he's been writing and planned to write the whole time while he was at the hotel. He begins to hate the play and becomes distraught, thinking that the play's terrible. Jack is rude and condescending, telling Wendy between laughs that they're stuck at the hotel and that there is simply no way down. Wendy tells Jack all of her concerns about Danny, and it's here that we see just how perspective Wendy is, as she is the first to realize exactly what's going on at the hotel. "But it's not just you. I worry when he goes out to play. I worry about him wanting a two-wheeler next year, even one with training wheels. I worry about his teeth and his eyesight, and about this thing, what he calls his shine. I worry because he's little, and he seems very fragile, and because something in this hotel seems to want him, and it will go through us to get him if it has to. That's why we must get him out, Jack. I know that. I feel that. We must get him out." Jack's responses, though he's the one saying them, seem to come from the hotel itself. It has just enough power over him to keep him from protecting his family, but not enough to make him do what Delbert Grady did. Not yet. Jack tells Wendy that the snowshoes would be too dangerous, and that there would be no other way to get down. He tries to seduce her strangely, telling her that they could wait for a ranger, and that then they could use their snowmobile to get down. This reminds both of them that they already have a snowmobile outside. Wendy is hopeful and excited, and Jack is angry on the inside, but calm outwardly. He tries to come up with excuses as to why they can't use it, but Wendy is unperturbed. Jack ultimately agrees that he'll take him down the next day. Later that night, Jack and Wendy discuss what happened to Danny Franklin. Jack convinces Wendy that Danny would likely put the bruises on his own neck after seeing something that happened in the past. Later, Wendy and Danny are sleeping, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts. He had agreed to take her and Danny away from the big bad boogeyman, and there were no problems. So you see, Al, I thought the best thing to do would be to kill her. The thought rose up from nowhere, naked and unadorned. Jack begins to visualize himself killing Wendy right there. Danny begins to toss around in his sleep behind him. They both lay there defenseless, Danny no doubt sensing his dad's twisted thoughts. They both depend on Jack, though they know that he's becoming dangerous. Now Jack sits there, playing out murder like fantasy, all the while snowed in the haunted hotel. It really has such a terrifying and immersive feeling that not many other books achieve. Jack's love for Danny, as he looks down at him stirring in his sleep, breaks through his trance. In that moment, Jack genuinely does want to take his family back to safety. He falls asleep, but then wakes up standing in room 217's bathroom. George Hatfield lay dead in the bathtub with a knife in his stomach. He stands up and tries to attack Jack. Jack runs out of the room, only to find himself in the basement of the Overlook. He searches through a filing cabinet and finds a timer connected to dynamite and a wasp nest. George appears then and starts to choke him. His dynamite in his hand turns into the cane that his father used to beat his mother. Jack begins to use it to beat George. The cane turns into a rope mallet, and George morphs into Danny as the mallet smashes through Danny's face. Jack wakes up then to find himself standing over Danny's bed. This is his reaction. His final scream had only been in his mind. He voiced it again, this time in a whisper. No. No, Danny. Never. Jack waits awake until the sun comes up before going out completely intent on getting his family back to safety. He's in the shed the next morning, searching for the parts for the snowmobile, and he can feel the hotel's pull on him. He finds the rope mallet and has to physically fight the urge to destroy the snowmobile. He realizes that he is the weakest link of the family, and that the hotel is using him to get at Danny. This is a pivotal moment in the story, as Jack has to decide if he's going to leave and protect his family, or stay and let the hotel win. Ultimately, it does win, as he takes off a part of the motor and throws it into the deep snow. Now, he has completely succumbed to the hotel, and there's no way out. The next chapter is hauntingly called The Hedges and takes us a few weeks into the future. They seem to have come to terms with the fact that they're stuck there and even enjoy each other's company. Danny has picked out specific safe spots within the hotel, and Wendy is waiting for the Rangers to get there so they can get back to Sidewinder. Danny on a few occasions tries to read Jack's mind, but he deliberately seems to be blocking him from whatever he's hiding. All that Danny can pick up is that it's something that Jack is both very proud of and deeply ashamed of doing. Danny goes down to the playground, ignoring Halloran's warnings to stay away from the topiary animals. He finds a hollowed out cement ring and is able to climb inside of it when the snow falls on top, trapping him inside of it. He then realizes that the ghost of a dead boy is stuck inside the tunnel with him. Danny claws at the entrance and is able to get out just in time as he hears the thing moving behind him. He turns and realizes that the topiary animals are out from under the snow. He quickly catches on to their game and how they only move whenever his back's turned to them. He takes the same route that Jack took whenever he had to face them. They nearly get him and scratch open his jeans as he stumbles onto the porch where Wendy and Jack find him. Danny tries telling Jack and Wendy about what happened, but Jack scolds him, pointing how the topiary animals are still under the snow. His veil slips and Danny's able to see inside of his memories at the time that he too was chased by them. It had flashed into his mind all at once, the way things sometimes did. The way it had about that woman wanting to be in that gray man's pants. He stared at his father with widening eyes. "You know I'm telling the truth," he whispered, shocked. "Danny," Jack's face tightening. "You know because you saw." Jack slaps Danny to stop him, and Wendy rushes over to pull him, causing him to collapse, overwhelmed, crying. Jack takes him to his bed, and him and Wendy apologize to each other. In that moment, Jack wishes that Wendy would ask him about the hedges, but she doesn't. We get to see a few heartbreaking moments like this in Jack's mind, as he is stuck behind the veil of the hotel itself, controlling him completely, as he tries to resist. They wake up that night to the elevator operating on its own. They all three go check it out together, when Wendy begins having random thoughts of parties and party masks pop into her head. With even Wendy now directly interacting with the hotel, you can see that the Overlook is becoming more powerful and dangerous. "I keep hearing voices in my head," she cried. "What is it? What's wrong? I feel like I'm going crazy." "What voices?" He looked at her with deadly blandness. She turned to Danny. "Did you?" Danny nodded slowly. "Yes, and music,
like from a long time ago, in my head.
Jack denies hearing anything, telling them that they must be crazy. He then proceeds to smash open a glass case with his bare knuckles to retrieve an elevator key, and then pushes Wendy to the ground. He turns to her, having perhaps one of his final moments of clarity. They are both staring at him carefully, as if he was a stranger they had never seen before, possibly a dangerous one. He opened his mouth, not sure what was going to come out. Wendy, it's my job," she said clearly. "Fuck your job." As the elevator reaches their floor, Jack stands in front, trying to hide what's inside of it. Wendy shoves him out of the way and climbs in, revealing that it's filled with party confetti and masks. With the physical shove, it shows Wendy finally taking action to protect her son, while the elevator filled with confetti turns their nightmare visions into something tangible and real. We go to Danny in the ballroom later, staring at a clock. He has marked the ballroom as one of the safe places within the hotel, but he goes against his rules of not touching anything and uses a silver key to wind up the clock. As he does this, a line from Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death plays in his head. "And the Red Death held sway over all." This doesn't mean much to Danny, but its reference hints to the reader at elites gathering for morbid, bizarre parties. Two figures pop up behind the clock face and begin going into sexual positions. The hotel is toying with Danny and using his own innocence against him. He pleads for the hotel to leave him alone before falling into another vision. Danny finds himself at the end of the dark hallway near the presidential suite, with the lumbering shadow smashing the walls with a mallet, coming towards him. This time, however, Dick Halloran shows up and tells him this. "If there is trouble," Halloran said, "you give a call. A big loud holler like the one that knocked me back a few minutes ago. I might hear you even way down in Florida. And if I do, I'll come on the run. I'll come on the run. I'll come on the..."
"Come now then. Come now. Come now. Oh, Dick, I need you. We all need..."
"Run. Sorry, but I gotta run. Sorry, Danny, old kid, old Doc, but I gotta run." Dick vanishes as the mallet-wielding shadow pops into view. Danny tries to back away and falls through the wall, where Tony appears for the first time in a long time. Tony was far below him, also falling. "I can't come anymore, Danny. He won't let me near you. None of them will let me near you. Get Dick. Get Dick." "Tony!" he screamed, but Tony was gone, and suddenly he was in a dark room. Danny sees the light coming from a room and follows to find that it's their room inside the hotel. Inside, on the medicine cabinet, he sees the word "Red Rum" written on it. A bowl materializes then in front of it, and the clock from earlier is inside. On the clock face, there's no numbers or hands, but it just says December 2nd. The word "Red Rum" is reflected on the glass on the face of the clock, where Danny now sees that it spells murder backwards. He then wakes up, finding himself on the floor of the ballroom. Using his shining, he screams out for Dick to come help. The beginning of the chapter tells us that the date was December 1st. This tells us that Dick only has one day to come help. We then go to Dick, who goes about his day enjoying himself in Florida. He then smells oranges, which we know from earlier means that he senses a shine or a premonition coming. He then gets Danny's pleads all the way on the other side of the country. Earlier in that day, Dick had thought he needed to get his will in order just in case. As he's getting things ready to leave back for Colorado, he notices the will on the table and wonders if he'll ever make it back from the hotel. Dick decides that saving Danny was more important than his own life. As Dick rushes back to Colorado, Danny is sitting on the stairs in the hotel when Wendy comes up to him. He tells her about Tony and how the hotel won't let them talk to each other anymore. He then tells her how they are convincing Jack that they want him, but really, they want Danny. He then tells Wendy that he knows about Jack throwing the snowmobile part into the snow. We go to Jack in the basement as he realizes he hasn't checked the boiler's pressure. It's all the way up to 220 psi when Watson had told him it would blow up if it got over 180. He gets the pressure to go down and craves alcohol, remembering the glittering bottles that he saw in the ballroom earlier. We go to Danny as he wakes up from a nightmare where the hotel explodes and Jack runs out with his hair on fire. He tries to use his shining to figure out where Jack's at in the hotel and catches his thoughts. He's thinking of his old drinking days, as if in conversation with someone. Suddenly, the hotel breaks in, screaming for him to get out of Jack's head. With the voices being so loud, Danny senses that they must be nearby. He checks out in the hallway just outside and finds that there's a man crawling around in a dog costume. The dog man barks at Danny and says that he's going to eat him. He tries to stand his ground, but the dog chases him back into his room. This is where Danny finally realizes that the hotel is completely in control now. We go back to Dick at the airport as he's trying to call the authorities. No one believes his story though, and they don't have any manpower to send up to help the Torrances. He's on the plane later when Danny's voice comes back into his head. His forehead wrinkled, his mouth drew down in a grimace of pain.
Dick, please come quick. We're in bad trouble, Dick. We need...
And that was all. It was suddenly gone. No fading out this time. Communication had been chopped off cleanly, as if with a knife. It scared him. Meanwhile, Jack is back in the hotel's ballroom. He seems completely insane at this point, and welcomes all the voices he hears throughout the overlook. He pushed the bat wings open and stepped through. "Hello, boys," Jack Torrance said softly. "Been away, but now I'm back." "Good evening, Mr. Torrance," Lloyd said, genuinely pleased. "It's good to see you." "It's good to be back, Lloyd," he said gravely, and hooked his leg over a stool between a man in a sharp blue suit and a bleary-eyed woman in a black dress who was peering into the depths of a Singapore sling. "What will it be, Mr. Torrance?" "Martini," he said with great pleasure. The room is completely filled with masked guests from the Overlook's past now. Lloyd tells Jack that the drinks are free and that the manager had ordered it. He goes on to tell Jack that the manager was interested in Danny. This makes Jack jealous, as he wants to be the one that the hotel wants. He has to speak to the manager, and Lloyd's face begins to morph into a grotesque, sore-riddled mess. After dancing with a woman and witnessing Derwent tease the man in the dog suit, Jack runs into Delbert Grady, who is casually walking around as a bartender. Grady denies that he killed his family, but convinces Jack that he must kill his to prove his loyalty, and that it'd be for their own good. Everyone disappears then, leaving him drunk and alone. He climbs on top of the bar, looking for more alcohol, when he falls and passes out on the floor. We go back to Dick as his plane is about to land. He's thinking about how the hedge animals seem to move, a subtle hint at what he may be facing in his near future. He gets a car and heads closer to the hotel as the radio warns to stay out of the storm. We go to Wendy as she tells Danny to wait in the bedroom while she goes to the kitchen for food. On her way down, she recalls how that morning she had heard Jack talking to someone named Grady, but doesn't remember the name. When she goes down there, she finds Jack in the ballroom, drunk and asleep on the floor. She tries to help him up, but he attacks her, accusing her of turning Danny against him. Danny comes in as Jack begins to strangle Wendy. She's able to reach an empty bottle and smashes it against Jack's head, knocking him unconscious. She realizes then that Grady was the caretaker that killed his family, and that Jack was planning on doing the same to them. Danny is confused and manic, but Wendy is able to calm him, telling him this.
Did you hear those people he was talking to this morning? Yes, the hotel people. I heard them too, and that means the hotel's getting stronger. It wants to hurt all of us, but I hope, that it can only do that through your daddy. It was the only one it could catch. Are you understanding me, Danny? It's desperately important that you understand. The hotel caught Daddy. He looked at Jack and groaned helplessly. They decide to put him in the food pantry. They're able to drag him over there and lock him inside just as he regains consciousness. Jack wakes up sometime later as Delbert Grady is on the other side of the pantry door. He relays to Jack how disappointed everyone in the hotel is with him, and that he only has one more chance to get it right. He also tells Jack how Dick Halloran is on the way due to Danny calling him with his gift. Jack promises that he won't fail them again as Grady unlocks the door. When Jack opens it, he finds a bottle of gin and the rope mallet. Wendy is in the bedroom, listening to Jack and Grady discuss killing her and Danny through the vents. The heat turns on and cuts them off, leaving her from hearing. She decides the only way to make sure that Jack hasn't escaped the pantry is to check for herself. This is the calm just before the storm, and all hell is about to break loose. King builds attention, taking multiple pages as she slowly makes her way down the stairs, step by step, when she sees this. She turned, and he was coming for her. It was Jack, and yet not Jack. His eyes were lit with a vacant, murderous glow. His familiar mouth now wore a quivering, joyless grin. He had the rope mallet in one hand. Jack brutally attacks Wendy with the mallet, crushing her ribs and one of her legs. She's able to push him over while he's off balance and buries the knife deep in his back. She crawls up the stairs, but Jack is up again and coming after her with the mallet.
We go back to Dick as he finally makes it to Sidewinder and rents a snowmobile. He makes his way through the snowstorm up to the overlook, where none other than the topiary hedge line is waiting for him. It knocks him off of his snowmobile into the snow, where we're left on a cliffhanger. It cuts directly to Wendy again as she makes it to the top of the stairs but falls down from sheer pain. Jack is there and brings the mallet down directly in the center of her spine and breaks something. She's still able to get to her bedroom and shuts and locks the door behind her. As Jack begins breaking through the door, Wendy realizes that Danny isn't in the room anymore. She's forced to hide in the bathroom, where Jack begins breaking through that door as well, but she slices his hand with the razor that she finds in the medicine cabinet. They both pause as they hear the rattle of Dick's snowmobile. Jack leaves, and Wendy goes out, intent on finding Danny, but collapses on the mattress. Meanwhile, Dick is still outside fighting with the topiary lion. He's able to douse it in fuel from the snowmobile, then sets it ablaze. As it lights up from the fire, he notices that the other animals are approaching him. He makes it up to the porch and then inside just in time, but Jack is there waiting for him. He smashes Dick's face with the mallet and then heads to the elevator. As Jack approaches, he senses Danny and says this. "Danny," he called. "Danny, come here a minute, will you? You done something wrong, and I want you to come and take your medicine like a man." "Danny?" "Danny." We finally go back to Danny and find him wandering through the dark hallways. Tony appears before him then and tells him that he's actually asleep in his bed and that Wendy and Dick may be injured and perhaps will be killed. He then tells Danny this.
Danny, you're in a place deep down in your own mind, the place where I am. I'm a part of you, Danny. You're Tony, you're not me. I want my mommy. I want my mommy. I didn't bring you here, Danny. You brought yourself because you knew. No, you've always known.
For the first time ever, Tony approaches Danny, getting close enough for him to reveal that he is in fact the older version of himself. Before disappearing, Tony tells Danny that he must remember what his father has forgotten. Danny runs away from his father through the overlook's halls, making Tony's visions a reality. Finally, he reaches the dead-end hallway of the presidential suite. Meanwhile, Wendy wakes up and searches for Danny. She finds Dick still alive but unconscious on the ground as she hears Jack screaming from the floor above them. Jack and Danny then complete the horrific prophecy and meet face to face. Jack approaches him, swinging the mallet back and forth, but Danny stands strong, saying he's not his father and he's not afraid of him. Jack pauses then, and the actual Jack breaks free momentarily, saying this to Danny.
Doc,
Jack Torrance said,
run away, quick, and remember how much I love you. No, Danny said.
Oh, Danny, for God's sake.
No,
Danny said. He took one of his father's bloody hands and kissed it.
It's almost over.
The hotel seizes control over Jack once more and forces him to bash his own face with a mallet. This takes the last visible part of Jack that was left, and then begins to morph into the different faces from the hotel's past. What remained of the face became a strange, shifting composite, many faces mixed imperfectly into one. Danny saw the woman in 217, the dog man, the hungry boy thing that had been in the concrete ring. Danny then remembers what his father had forgotten, which is to check the pressure of the boiler. Realizing this, Jack runs to the elevator and goes down to the boiler room. Danny uses his shine to locate and meet up with Wendy and Dick. Realizing there's no time to talk, he relays the image of the hotel exploding using his shine to Dick. Dick uses his adrenaline and picks Wendy and Danny up and runs to the hotel's entrance. Using Jack's body, the hotel makes it to the boiler room and tries to release the pressure. Seeing the needle drop, it says this.
I win,
it cried. It capered obscenely in the hot rising mist, waving its flaming hands over its head.
Not too late. I win. Not too late. Not too late. Not.
Words turned into a shriek of triumph, and the shriek was swallowed in a shattering roar as the Overlook's boiler exploded. Dick, carrying Wendy and Danny, is making his way out of the entrance of the hotel as it explodes. It blows them into the snow and engulfs the hedge animals that are waiting there for them in flames. They're relatively unharmed by the blast and are able to get on the snowmobile. Dick stops by the shed to grab fuel and blankets for the trip. As Dick enters the shed, he sees a rope mallet and grabs it. The hotel's influence immediately takes him over as he begins rationalizing killing Danny. He's able to snap out of it, however, throwing the mallet down, shocked at how strong the hotel's pull was. This is a horrifying moment, but it lets us forgive Jack a little bit, as even Dick, with his power and understanding, is nearly subdued immediately by the hotel. Ultimately, they grab everything they need and make it to Sidewinder safely. The party is finally over. The epilogue takes us to Dick that summer as he's working at a lodge in Maine. He goes out onto a front porch to find Wendy in a rocking chair, injured but alive. They talk for a moment as she tells him how Al had found her a new job before he goes to talk to Danny. Danny tells Dick how he wishes he didn't have the Shining and misses his father. Dick tells Danny this, wrapping the story up beautifully. The world's a hard place, Danny. It don't care. It don't hate you and me, but it don't love us either. Terrible things happen in the world, and there are things no one can explain. Good people die in bad, painful ways and leave the folks that love them all alone. Sometimes it seems like it's only the bad people who stay healthy and prosper. The world don't love you, but your mama does, and so do I. You're a good boy. You grieve your daddy, and when you feel you have to cry over what happened to him, you go into a closet or under your covers and cry until it's all out of you again. That's what a good son has to do. But see that you get on. That's your job in this hard world. Keep your love alive and see that you get on, no matter what. Pull your act together and just go on. I really enjoyed this read through, and I picked up on everything that I missed the first few times I read it. In my opinion, it's a much more competent and realistic book than the first two novels. King does an excellent job on immersing you behind the characters, the isolation, and the gradual slope into the hotel's control. The themes are clear but not too on the nose. Cycles of trauma, alcoholism, and the fear of not being enough. Between the hedge animals, the woman in room 217, and the man in the dog suit, there's plenty of good old-fashioned horror in here. But then there's the more primal fear of being attacked by someone that's supposed to protect you. The helplessness that you feel reading behind Danny and Wendy's eyes is perfectly tragic. This is Stephen King's first true masterpiece in my eyes, and I give it 4.5 stars. Before King ever starred his novels, he had already been honing his craft for years writing short stories. Most of these would be found in magazines or simply left in manuscript piles. On the next episode of Constant Reader Chronicles, we'll be diving into his fourth publication, Night Shift, his first collection of short stories. But before you go, I want to share with you my first chapter in my debut novel, Evergreen. Gravel and mud blasted into the rain. Stephen Mosier's El Camino went from road to ditch to road again. "Goodbye, whore," he roared out of the window, presenting his middle finger to the woman at the trailer. The baby in her arms stared vacantly as the taillight swerved down the little road and out of view. "That's what you get, Stephen," he said to the wavering rearview mirror, the road curving loosely in his vision. He didn't mean to hit her. He almost never did. But what was he supposed to do? After all, it wasn't her that got up at the ass crack of dawn, as his father used to say, and drove to the mill 5 to 6 days a week. No. And it wasn't her that had to grind metal flakes from steel parts 12 hours every night. You know who was doing that? Me, he shouted at the blurred highway through gritted teeth. If he wanted to drink 1 or 2 beers, then he would. Hell, he'd drink 10 if he felt so obliged. The mirror reflected his facial features, his unmanaged beard mixing seamlessly with his drooping, ragged eyes. He hiccuped and swatted at the radio dial, flipping automatically to the local rock station. Highway to Hell filled the car-truck hybrid, the volume already as high as it would go. He figured he could forgive her this time, and he'd come back after he blew off some steam. He did love the girl, wrong as she may be, about as much as he'd ever loved anything. She was just so goddamn lazy, which was the main issue. How could she be tired when she hadn't even left the house in months? Always something with her. His mood had started to cool down, like ice cubes dropped into hot coffee. Guilt caught in a knot in his gut, and the image of his daughter, staring as he drove off, played on his eyelids. His thoughts derailed as he spotted a police car parked in front of a church just off the road. He straightened up and grasped the steering wheel with both hands. Just relax, he thought. It's all good. His face was pale white, like a foggy glass pane, fully concentrating on keeping the wheels moving in a straight line. His heart pounded in his eardrums when the headlights flipped on and pulled out behind him. Son of a bitch, Stephen murmured, the tension somehow stronger than the dank mildew that thickened the air. The bright headlights grew in the mirror, casting shadowing streaks against him like a detective comic strip. 3 strikes, you're out, Stephen. Hold it together. Images of court documents nagged at his brain, the first 2 DUIs following up like a grim slideshow. The El Camino vibrated violently against a highway's rumble strip, the world's most isolated earthquake within a drunken man's beating chest. Damn it, he screamed, his head light as helium. The cop's headlights filled the entirety of the mirror now, and each second multiplied Stephen's dread. His eyes, wide as dinner plates, locked onto a rusty green street sign. He flipped on his blinker and tapped the brakes, holding his breath as the car turned on the East Under Road. Come on. The cruiser drove by down the highway, past Stephen. A titanic weight lifted off the drunk man, replaced by shock and disbelief at his good fortune. Aha! His hand was slapping the steering wheel hard enough to bruise his fingertips. You did it, you dirty dog. The El Camino shredded down the country road, filling the air with the roar of his modified exhaust pipe. It was now hitting the dash in perfect rhythm with the drums. Highway to hell, and I'm going down. A few miles of dark country trailed behind Stephen, and another road sign popped into view. Evergreen Road. That road led to Blackbird Road, which turned back onto the highway. He could get a few whoppers from the king himself and get back home. He scurried onto the paved shortcut as the song switched over to Hotel California. Stupid pig damn near gave me a heart attack. A nervous laugh escaped. He thought that was it for sure. Lord knows he'd been a lot drunker than this, bringing Kirsty and the baby to the doctor. That cop had actually pulled out behind him and then let him go. A sigh seeped out of his hair-clustered nostrils. He thought of his daughter, Alexis. The devil on his shoulder didn't like the baby because Stephen loved her. The monkey on his back and the devil on his shoulder agreed. They didn't just not like her, they hated her. He knew the church close to the king was hosting an AA meeting later that night. Maybe he could give that another chance. The radio roared out of nowhere, the station somehow flipping to a dead broadcast on its own. The gray clouds poured without mercy as an angry and befuddled crease folded Stephen's brow. What in the... He grabbed the tuning dial and flipped through the empty stations. It had gone from 102.9 all the way to 90.5 without him touching a thing. He finally found his way back to the Eagles. A chill touched his neck then, and he watched with awe as the dial rolled itself from station to station. Just then, something on the road caught his eye. Fuck! A huge white dog with snarling teeth stood in the center of the road. A great Pyrenees, like the one his nan had had. But this one was much bigger, and possibly bigger. His hand snatched the wheel to the side, swerving the car and slamming the brakes down. The sound of screeching rubber rumbled the air. The inside of the car roared with the chorus of his favorite Eagle song. The tires gave in and surrendered the El Camino to a series of destructive flips, with Stephen screaming as his head hit the window and steering wheel. The car somersaulted down Evergreen Road like it was a flight of steps and finally came to a halt in a ditch, resting sideways against a line of trees. Stephen Mosier lay there, head spinning, blood gushing from his nose and mouth. His face was a swollen, haggard memory of what it had been before. His brain was loopy, but the adrenaline in his blood was helping him to not slip into unconsciousness. The entire vehicle was destroyed, but one of the speakers was still playing. 3 bloody teeth fell from his mouth as tears rolled down his face. He collected his strength, slid over to the passenger side of his totaled vehicle, and reached for the door handle. At first, it wouldn't budge, as if it was glued in place, but it finally gave way when he put his shoulder into it. Rain pelted his broken face at an angle, the overhead lamp casting a dim light through the car's now red interior. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, and what looked back was a wasteland. Blood covered his face like strawberry puree, and his lip was split into origami flaps. A horror-soaked moan escaped him, and his stomach churned like spoiled milk in the hot sun. He went to touch his face and realized his hand was twisted sideways, the fingers sticking out like dry sticks of hay. Stephen fell out into the muddy blackness of the night, the sounds of water and wind mixing in a chaotic harmony. He stretched up and looked up into the sky, screaming, a dull pain pulsating through his wrist. His swollen eyes fell upon the shadow of a man, standing unfazed by the elements. How could he be that tall? The silhouette appeared from nowhere, a cloth cap the only thing keeping him dry. Help! Stephen cried in agony, using his good hand to drag himself to the road. His fingernails first bent, then broke off as his drunk fingers searched for purchase on the gritty asphalt. He inched his way closer and closer to the man in writhing agony, his gaze never leaving the dark shape. Please, he screamed, but the man didn't budge. As Stephen came within feet of the man, he noticed he was holding something in both hands. No, please! Stephen shrieked. The barrel of a long black gun stretched toward him. My God, his eyes was the second to last thing to go through Stephen's mind. Evergreen, a rural horror tale, will be releasing in June on Amazon KDP for digital, paperback, and hardback edition. You can join the mailing list in the description to get updates, the link when it drops, and the first 3 chapters of Evergreen. I'll also be releasing the first few chapters of my next few works. I really appreciate you watching my whole video, and consider subscribing so you can see my deep dives into all of King's other masterpieces. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Constant Reader Chronicles.